Marlon, have you seen that the documentary, the 50 Cent?
No, I haven't seen it.
Diddy?
I haven't seen it.
Oh man, you working
Everybody
hard.
telling me you got to see it.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah,
Part of me don't want to see it.
You probably don't.
Gene Deal just broke his silence, and what he's spilling now is straight up shocking. The man has been sitting on information that could flip the whole story, and he finally decided to speak on it. Remember that Netflix documentary about Diddy that everyone kept buzzing about? Well, the footage Gene collected was so intense that Netflix wouldn't even touch it. They couldn't show any of it, and now Gene is gearing up to drop every single receipt that 50 Cent had to cut out. And trust me, this might rewrite everything people thought they knew. You came here for the real story, the raw truth, and that's exactly what Gene is laying out. This is Diddy's former bodyguard, a man who watched everything unfold with his own eyes. And now he's letting the world hear what he's been holding in for years. He was supposed to be in that Netflix documentary, locked in and ready, but things went sideways. Gene sat down with 50 Cent for 45 minutes, planning out how deep they were gonna go. But then the director stepped out of line and disrespected him. Gene didn't play along. He walked away and kept his own story. Now he's finally exposing all the situations that never made it to the final cut. And what he's revealing about the City College tragedy and the truth behind Anthony Wolf Jones is wild. The truth about what happened with Kim Porter is way heavier than anyone expected. And the reason certain A-list celebrities paid to keep themselves out of this documentary is even more shocking. Everything 50 Cent couldn't show is finally coming to light right here, and it's about to get intense. So let's break this down. Before we get into the leaked details, you've got to understand the chaos happening behind the scenes because it was wild. 50 Cent and Netflix dropped a documentary called Sean Combs, The Reckoning, and it shot straight to #1 instantly. Everybody was streaming it, everybody was debating it, but here's the part nobody is saying out loud. Some of the most important stories were nowhere to be found. Gene Deal, Diddy's former bodyguard, was around for years, watching everything unfold. The high-profile events, the heated moments, the deals behind closed doors, the heartbreaking tragedies. Gene saw it all. He's been stacking footage and evidence for years, holding it until the day he could finally speak freely. At first, Gene wanted to be part of 50 Cent's documentary. He believed the project was finally going to tell the real story without filters. But then he met with the director, a woman named Alex Stapleton. And that meeting went left fast. Gene felt the energy was off, the respect wasn't there, and from that moment, everything changed. Gene came in ready to make this happen. He planned a full package deal with two men who knew Diddy from day one, Tim and Kirk Burroughs. These three had the kind of history that could map out Diddy's whole timeline, from childhood days to street-era moves to the rise of the business empire. They were bringing the full story, no missing pieces. Gene asked for $50,000 for all three of them together, which was more than fair considering the evidence, footage, and first-hand knowledge they had been holding on to for years. But this is where the situation turned messy fast. Alex Stapleton, the director, hit Gene with something wild. She told him that 50 Cent doesn't decide what goes in the documentary, and he doesn't control who gets paid. She basically claimed that 50's name was only being used to boost attention, but he wasn't actually running the project. That statement instantly rubbed Gene the wrong way and made him question the whole setup. Gene felt like she wasn't showing him even basic respect. He brought invoices proving what other documentaries had paid him before, clear evidence of his value. But she still called him a liar right to his face. Imagine that. This man spent years protecting Diddy, saw serious incidents unfold, gathered evidence with real risk involved, and now he's being treated like he's just making things up. And here's where things get even crazier. While Gene was trying to line up a fair deal for everybody, Kirk Burroughs was out here making quiet moves on the side. That's how the industry plays. People look out for themselves first, even when a solid plan is on the table. Gene was trying to keep things clean and make sure everybody ate the right way, but Kirk was slipping off to secure his own separate arrangement. So Gene stepped back and walked away completely. Because of that, he refused to take part in the project, and that's exactly why the documentary on Netflix feels like pieces are missing. The one person who carried the deepest knowledge didn't show up, and now he's finally ready to tell the parts they left out, and we're talking about major details they barely touched. Let's get into one of the biggest secrets, how Bad Boy Records was really set up, because this detail changes everything. Kirk Burroughs, the same guy we just talked about, owned 25% of Bad Boy from day one. Diddy held the other 75%. But here's the twist that threw everyone off. The company wasn't even under Diddy's name. It was all filed under his mother, Janice Combs. Why would Diddy avoid putting the company under his own name? Why move that much power to his mother? Gene Deal says he knows exactly why. It was a strategic setup designed to dodge legal heat and protect the empire behind the scenes. Diddy already knew serious lawsuits were coming after the City College tragedy, and we'll break down that situation soon. What matters right now is this. 9 people lost their lives at an event he organized, and he knew their families were going to take legal action, so he made sure the company wasn't under his own name. It was a cold strategy, but it was strategy nonetheless. But here's where it gets even more intense. Diddy didn't just want protection, he wanted full control. According to Kirk's own testimony in the documentary, Diddy pulled up with a baseball bat and pressured him into signing away his 25% stake. Kirk said the threat was clear, and he felt he had no choice. He tried to take the situation to court in 2003, but the case was dismissed because too much time had passed. Think about how wild that is. Kirk helped co-found Bad Boy Records. He put in the work, built the vision, and moved step for step with Diddy from the early days. And then everything he built was taken from him through fear and pressure. Kirk even ended up without stable housing at one point, while Diddy rose to billionaire status off the same company they created together. The documentary mentioned this situation, but they didn't dig deep at all. Gene Deal could have broken down the full blueprint, how the company was placed under Diddy's mother's name to hide assets, dodge lawsuits, and keep certain moves off the radar. None of that made it into the final cut, and the reason that information got left out feels very suspicious. Now, this is where the whole story takes a deep, dark turn, because Gene Deal says there's an entire murder case the documentary straight up skipped. And it's not just any case. It's the story of Anthony Wolf Jones, a man who stood with Bad Boy from day one. Wolf wasn't some random security guard. He was there before the record deals, before the industry hype, before Diddy even knew what the empire would become. Wolf was loyal, and he knew everything. And I mean everything. He understood the business moves, the behind-the-scenes tensions, the payouts, and what really went down at those private events. Wolf carried secrets that could shake the whole industry. And according to Gene Deal, decisions made by Diddy played a direct role in the situation that led to Wolf's death. Gene says the documentary team couldn't tell this story the right way because they didn't dig, didn't get the right intel, or maybe they had some of it but chose not to use it. Wolf was killed by someone connected to BMF, Black Mafia family, one of the biggest crime organizations tied to hip-hop history. And Gene is saying there's a straight line connecting Wolf's death to moves happening around Diddy at the time. But in the documentary, Wolf gets barely a mention. They flashed a couple photos, labeled him as security, and kept it moving. Why? Because this story touches real danger, organized crime, deadly conflicts, and people who do not want their names in any spotlight. Netflix didn't want to step into that territory. Even 50 Cent probably didn't want to push that boundary either. But Gene Deal is standing firm, saying this story has to be told. Wolf's death wasn't random. It ties into the larger picture, and understanding it changes the whole narrative around everything else. This next story is going to have people heated because the documentary told you pieces of the City College tragedy, but Gene Deal says the real truth was left out. And he would know. He was actually there that night and saw the whole situation unfold. What he revealed flips the entire narrative. December 28, 1991, Diddy put together a celebrity basketball event at City College in New York. It was advertised as a charity moment, a feel-good event with big names pulling up. Heavy D was involved, and stars like Mike Tyson, LL Cool J, and more were expected. The building was jam-packed wall to wall. Gene Deal and his security team were hired to control the outside crowd. He had 18 trained men, dogs like Rottweilers and Pit Bulls, plus gates and a full setup to keep everything organized. Gene understood how crowds move when major celebrities pull up in Harlem, so he had a real plan in place. But the day before the event...
So yeah, I've been really quiet. I'm gonna go back to being quiet, but I just, before 2025 closes out, you know what I'm saying? I just thought I'm gonna just address some things, you know what I'm saying?
People pushed to get in. And when Mike Tyson and LL Cool J walked right through the main entrance instead of slipping through a quieter route, the energy exploded. The crowd surged forward so hard that people got trapped and crushed in the stairwell. But here's the part the documentary barely touched. A woman named Jessica Rosenblum was involved in organizing the entrance layout. Gene says she was the one directing how the doors should be handled that night. And according to him, her decisions played a huge role in how the crowd flow turned into pure chaos. This detail changes everything. Jessica Rosenblum was one of the main promoters working with Diddy and Heavy D, and according to Gene, when she saw the crowd pushing forward, she completely panicked. But here's the wild part. Gene says her first thought wasn't the people trying to get inside. It was the cash box holding all the ticket money. He claims Jessica grabbed that box and locked the door at the bottom of the stairs to protect the money, trapping a crowd of adults inside that stairwell. Because that door was locked, pressure built up fast. People were crushed and unable to move, and the situation turned dangerous in seconds. Gene tried to get down the stairs himself, but the crowd was jammed so tightly he couldn't even get through. He had to run all the way around the gym, cut through another entrance, and start opening doors from the inside. By the time he reached the scene, the damage was already done. Gene says he tried to help multiple adults who were injured, doing everything he could, even CPR, but some of them didn't make it. One man stood there crying, heartbroken, saying, "This was supposed to be our night out. How am I even supposed to explain this?" The whole moment shook Gene to his core. Gene Deal witnessed every second of this chaos. He says he knows exactly who locked that door and how it all spiraled out of control. But Jessica Rosenblum was never held accountable in any real way. Her name showed up in old news reports, but no charges, no consequences, nothing. The documentary talked about the City College tragedy, but only around Diddy and Heavy D. They never mentioned Jessica, never explained why Gene's entire security team was suddenly removed, and never admitted that a locked door, meant to protect a box of cash, turned a packed stairwell into a deadly trap. This was a major piece of the story, and it was completely left out. Gene tried to tell this entire story in the documentary, every detail, but none of it made the final cut. And you really have to stop and ask yourself why that happened, because the behind-the-scenes drama was just as wild as the stories Gene was ready to expose. Gene had already set up a full package deal with Tim and Kirk Burrows, three men who knew Diddy from completely different angles. Tim understood the early life and background. Kirk had deep knowledge of the business structure and contracts, and Gene carried the street-level truth, the security moments, and the situations nobody else wanted to touch. Together, they could have delivered the most complete version of Diddy's story ever filmed. But then Alex Stapleton, the director, started switching up. She told Gene the amount he asked for was crazy money, even though he showed her real invoices proving he'd been paid similar rates by other productions. He had receipts, but she brushed them off like they didn't matter. Then she hit him with the comment that completely changed the energy. She told him 50 Cent doesn't decide what goes in the documentary, and he doesn't decide who gets paid. She basically laid it out. 50's name was being used for marketing, but he didn't hold any actual creative control. Just think about that for a second. They promoted this entire project as 50 Cent's documentary about Diddy, using his long-standing tensions with Diddy to hype it up. But behind the curtain, he didn't even have the power to choose what stories made it into the film. That means the show was being sold one way to the public, while the real decision-making was happening somewhere completely different. Gene saw all of that and realized he wasn't dealing with the project he thought he signed up for. And that's when he walked away. It's wild how this all played out. Gene felt straight up disrespected, and honestly, anyone in his position would have felt the same. He's been telling these stories for years on his own platform, backed by real evidence, footage, photos, documents, everything, yet the director acted like his voice didn't matter. That hit a nerve. Meanwhile, Kirk Burrows was moving sideways behind the scenes. He kept calling Gene, trying to convince him to take less money, acting like he was trying to help the team. But Gene later discovered Kirk was actually negotiating his own private deal with the production. That's industry behavior right there. Everybody looking out for themselves first. So Gene shut the whole thing down and walked away. That decision is exactly why the documentary feels incomplete today. So many crucial stories were never included because the person who lived through most of it refused to participate after being treated like he didn't bring value. The man with the most knowledge stepped out, and the final version shows it. Now let's get into something that really frustrates viewers. The documentary barely touched on Kim Porter. She was Diddy's former partner and the mother of his children. She passed away suddenly in 2018 at just 47 years old. The official cause listed was pneumonia, but a lot of people still have questions about how everything happened. Kim Porter had years around Diddy. She understood the business world, the private events, the tension, and the energy in those circles. She saw things up close, and then her passing happened without much explanation beyond the official statement. And the documentary almost didn't address her at all. No real breakdown, no deeper look, nothing. According to multiple sources, the production team avoided the Kim Porter story on purpose. Maybe it was too sensitive, too complicated, or too controversial for them to touch on camera. But Gene Deal says he has information about what went on behind the scenes, and he believes that part of the story deserves to be told too. Gene actually knew Kim. He looked out for her at times, and he says he was aware of things the public never heard about. But none of that made it into the documentary. They just flashed a couple photos, mentioned she was the mother of Diddy's children, and kept it moving. For someone who played such a major role in Diddy's life, that tiny segment felt way too light, unless there was a reason they didn't want to dig into her story. Now here's where things start looking suspicious. Diddy threw massive parties for decades. Events filled with top-tier celebrities, actors, musicians, athletes, even people with political power. Everybody showed up to those events because Diddy's network stretched everywhere. So why didn't the documentary include any stories about the famous guests who were always around him? Why didn't they show who partied with him for years? Why didn't they include stories from those private rooms and invite-only sections? It doesn't add up. You're telling me Diddy hosted countless wild, exclusive parties, and not one major celebrity ever got pulled into the mix. That doesn't sound realistic. According to Gene Deal, he believes certain A-list names didn't want their reputations anywhere near these allegations, so they supposedly reached out and paid to stay out of the documentary. It makes sense. These people have careers, brands, endorsements, and families to protect.
So when he starts screaming on Chef Jordan, while if he worrying about my situation, now he's up in her face. That he ended up pushing her, and he pushed her out the door. That, you know what I'm saying? She fell on her ass and all that other shit.
If their names even brushed up against accusations tied to Diddy, their whole world could fall apart. And Gene claims 50 Cent took the money because he's a businessman first. He wasn't trying to wreck other people's careers. He was focused on shining a light on Diddy's behavior, not dragging unrelated celebrities into controversy. But if that's true, that means the documentary we saw still isn't the full story, not even close. The documentary you saw was the clean version, the version that keeps powerful names safe while putting all the weight on Diddy. Gene sees that clear as day. It's polished, controlled, and missing all the stories that would have shaken the entire industry. And speaking of celebrities staying quiet, check out what Marlon Wayans said when someone asked if he watched the documentary. His reaction had people talking instantly. Marlon said he hasn't seen it, and probably never will. But then he dropped a line that made everyone pause. He called the documentary a narrative. He said when people put certain clips together, they can shape any story they want, and then he added, "Everybody's being programmed." That comment hit hard. Now, why would Marlon say that? Was he defending Diddy? Was he hinting that the documentary might be biased? Or was he trying to distance himself because he doesn't want his own name pulled into anything messy? He said that a lot of people in the industry have whispered for years that Marlon and Diddy crossed paths in ways the public never heard about. Nothing confirmed, just rumors floating around entertainment circles. But when Marlon refuses to watch the documentary and starts talking about narratives and programming, it makes people wonder what he really knows. His reaction wasn't casual. It sounded like someone who's seen things up close and doesn't want to get involved on camera. That alone adds even more mystery to the whole situation. It really makes you stop and wonder, what does Marlon actually know? Gene Deal says he's aware of things involving Marlon and plenty of other major celebrities, but none of them wanted their stories told, so they stayed far away from the documentary. They weren't trying to get caught in the crossfire, and Gene could see that clearly. Now let's get into one of the most explosive parts of this whole situation, the private footage, the behind-the-scenes videos of Diddy before his arrest. This is the part that had people asking one big question: how did 50 Cent even get that footage? The documentary shows Diddy in a New York hotel room having private conversations with his lawyer on speakerphone, discussing his next moves, reacting to the media, trying to plan out his strategy. This wasn't public content. This was personal, behind closed doors, inside his inner circle. Back then, Diddy had hired a videographer to record him during that period. Maybe he planned to make his own documentary one day. Maybe he wanted a personal archive. Who knows? But someone was definitely filming him closely. The thing is, all that footage belonged to Diddy. There were NDAs, contracts, and legal agreements in place. So how did 50 Cent end up using it in a Netflix documentary? How did footage shot under Diddy's control with professional confidentiality agreements end up in a project created by one of his biggest public rivals? That's the part nobody's explaining. And Gene believes the story behind that leak is way bigger than anyone is admitting. Diddy's legal team moved fast. The moment that private footage hit Netflix, they sent a cease and desist. They called it stolen footage, saying it was never approved for release and should have never been shown to the public. They even demanded that Netflix pull the entire documentary. That's how serious they took it. Netflix fired back, saying they obtained the footage legally, but they refused to explain how they got it. And 50 Cent stayed silent too. Not a single word about where that footage came from. Even the videographer who filmed Diddy during that time hasn't said anything publicly. Total silence from every direction. So what really went down? One theory people bring up is that the videographer sold the footage because Diddy allegedly didn't pay him. Gene says Diddy had a habit of not paying people on time. So maybe the videographer felt played and decided to get even. Another theory, someone might have slipped the footage to 50 Cent for a price, or maybe the chain of custody got messy and the footage changed hands without everyone realizing the legal risk. Is the footage actually illegal? Nobody knows for sure, but the whole situation feels shady from every angle, and it makes viewers question what else in the documentary came from behind the scenes chaos. Gene Deal also shared a personal story that shows how tense things could get around Diddy. After Gene stopped working for him, Misa Hilton, someone who had a long history with Diddy, reached out and asked Gene to look out for her. She wanted to enjoy her life, step out, and feel safe, but she didn't want any confrontation with Diddy. She trusted Gene because she knew he understood the scene and wasn't scared of anybody. Gene charged her $2,250 for a few hours of protection, and he told her straight up, if Diddy showed up and saw her standing with Gene, nothing was going to happen. Diddy knew exactly who Gene was, and he knew Gene wasn't the type to back down from anybody. The documentary included a story from Eric Sermon, the rapper and producer, and what he described was intense. He said he was in a car with Misa when Diddy suddenly showed up and started acting aggressive toward her. Eric claimed Diddy swung at Misa right there in the street while Eric was sitting in the car watching it all happen. Eric said Diddy even called him out, telling him to come around the corner if he wanted to fight. But instead of stepping in, Eric left the situation and went somewhere else to cool off and listen to music. Gene Deal couldn't believe that. He said if someone was in his car and Diddy came at them like that, he would have stepped up no matter who the person was. Gene says he always stood on his principles and protecting people was part of who he is. According to Gene, Diddy had a long history of aggressive behavior toward women, and people inside the industry knew about it for years. It wasn't a hidden secret, it was just something people didn't speak on because Diddy held power, influence, and serious money. Folks stayed quiet to avoid problems. The documentary showed that hallway video involving Cassie, and the whole world reacted to it. But Gene said this wasn't new behavior. He claims this type of energy had been around for decades, and the only reason the public finally saw it is because that one video leaked. So after all this, what does Gene Deal actually think about the documentary? He watched it carefully, studied the scenes, took detailed notes, and he didn't hold back with his opinion. He said the documentary was basically old news for anyone who had been close to the industry. All the wild parties, the control, the pressure, the messy situations, none of that surprised people who already knew how things work. Gene said the only fresh piece of content was the behind-the-scenes footage of Diddy before his arrest. Everything else was just repackaged to make it easy for mainstream audiences to digest. Seeing Diddy talk to his lawyers, stressing over the media, and trying to figure out his next move was actually interesting. That part felt real, like you were watching him scramble behind the scenes. Gene says that footage had value, but everything else? He believes you watch it once and that's it. Nothing shocking enough, nothing deep enough, nothing that makes you hit replay. And Gene knows exactly why. Because he could have taken this documentary to another level. He could have added depth, real history, and actual evidence. But the production didn't want that. They wanted something safe, something that would stream big on Netflix without putting any powerful names in uncomfortable positions. The documentary painted Diddy as the only villain in the whole industry, like he was the lone monster moving around unchecked. But Gene says that's not the real picture. According to him, there were plenty of people who knew what was going on and stayed quiet. Plenty of people who were involved and never faced anything. But those names never showed up in the documentary. Their secrets stayed hidden, their reputations protected. And that's why Gene calls the documentary incomplete. He's been telling these stories for years, way before Netflix stepped in, way before 50 Cent decided to put cameras on it. Gene has been talking on podcasts, YouTube, and his own platforms, sharing what he witnessed with no filter. Now it's your turn to speak up. What story hit you the hardest? What do you think should have been included in the documentary but wasn't? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's break this down for real. And before you go, make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment so more people can get in on this conversation. I'll catch you in the next one. Stay sharp out there.